Thank you for watching. My name's Glenn Morgan, and we are back again here with We the Govern. Today I'm going to talk about a story that appears like a national story, but really has a lot of local impacts in places like Washington State and other bluish states around the country. And it has to do with this angry infighting that we're seeing inside the Democrat Party and how a lot of the bitter critters are definitely fighting back right now. So let's just dive into the story. And before we do, I just want to remind you that if you haven't done so already, hit the like and subscribe button down below and feel free to share this video with others who you think might be interested in this story as well, or some of the other content that we have on our channel. So let's get into this because this has been making national news. It's pretty current. It's a big story. Ripple effects all over the country here. And we have a guy here named David Hogg, who's the current vice chair of the Democrat National Committee. So the National Democratic Party, this is their vice chair right here. He's angry. He's usually angry most of the time. But right now, I think he actually has a good reason for being angry because there's this big fight going on right now about removing him from power. Now, the big question usually comes because if you haven't paid any attention to the Democrat Party or any of the people who are kind of running around over there, taking over that party and pretty angry about the fact that Trump's in office right now, the big question is, who is David Hogg? He's been nicknamed Camera Hogg for a long time, but David Hogg, essentially right now, he is the elected vice chair of the Democratic Party, the National Democrat Party. So if you live in a blue state and you're wondering where your political class gets all their direction and ideas, it's because of guys like this, and he is an important part of that process right now. Now, he became famous a number of years ago after a school shooting down Parkland, and it was in Florida, and he actually became quite wealthy after that. He's worth several $1 million right now. It's the estimated value that he's been able to obtain as a anti-gun activist mostly. His primary goal has been to disarm you, to make sure that you have no way of defending yourself against violent criminals in the future, and this has been very lucrative and a good lucrative option and choice for him to go down, and being vice chair of the party kind of makes sense. He's also quite an elitist in his own way. He graduated from Harvard here just a couple years ago. There was kind of a big story a number of years ago about this where he didn't get into a bunch of other colleges. He was complaining about it, and then he gets into Harvard despite the fact that his SAT scores were quite a bit lower than was typically accepted at Harvard. I don't put a lot of stock in that because Harvard and some of the other Ivy League colleges oftentimes do like bringing in celebrities of some kind. And obviously with this guy's background, especially with the leftist sort of bona fides that he had, it would make sense that Harvard would accept him and that he would get out of that college. Now, there have been rumors, and I want to clarify this right now, that these are not true, that he was not at the school shooting. And this is really a fake story that was put out there, caused in part by CBS basically doing just a terribly botched job doing an interview with him, and that rumor, which seems to keep cycling around on the conservative side of things, is not true. He was at that school shooting. He was in a closet, or at least in a classroom, when it did happen, and it was a great path for him to go to Harvard and to make a lot of money and to become the vice chair of the Democrat Party. Now, one of the things that he did once he got in there, and who can blame him, he really wants to remove these old, crufty Democrats from elected office because most of them don't seem to agree with his aggressive style with the Democrat Party and with some of his beliefs. And even if they do generally agree on the same policies, he just doesn't think that they're young enough to be running the party. And so this has been a big angle, and he's threatened the Democrat Party with basically primarying a whole bunch of their old guard with the $20 million that he's raised on his own into his own political action committee. So that's kind of who David is right now. Now, of course, what's happened is that has angered the old guard, the very old guard that he plans to replace in the party. And so, of course, they are finding any and every excuse they can to remove him from his elected vice chair position at the party. And they actually took the first step on this earlier this week, where they've officially voided his election. And listen, this is kind of absurd because by all accounts, I mean, he really was elected there legitimately following the rules, as goofy as they might be, at the party to get into this position, and then to see the old guard not liking who they actually put here, deciding that they want to remove him from this position, and then using this kind of fig leaf of an excuse to remove him. It is shady operations at the Democrat National Committee. Now, one of the things that I'm going to point out here with this whole story is that, I clearly don't agree with this guy, but the party back in February when they were doing these elections, I mean, they were widely mocked around the country, even internationally, for just this weird, beyond parody and kind of chaotic sort of gender equality, kind of this cringeworthy video went viral all over the country and internationally, as I said, where they were really struggling, the Democrat Party leadership was struggling to explain their gender rules and non-binary numbers and equality between different sexes. And of course, since there's 500 genders, how do you actually divide up the positions in their party, big pronoun fights, all kinds of weirdness. And it was comical. And like many of you, if you saw it, you were laughing at it. I was laughing at it at the time. And of course, the net result of this was that despite all that drama, the Democrat Party nationally elects two white guys, two very angry, super hardcore left white guys to run their party. And so despite all the work and effort they went through, the gender-bending alphabet soup sort of analysis, this is who they got in charge. Well, there's nothing really new to kind of the scams that are going on right now behind the scenes at the National Democrat Party and trying to remove Hogg from the vice president position, because we've seen this before. Back in 2016, where Bernie Sanders was essentially iced out of being the presidential nominee by the Hillary Clinton campaign and her supporters inside the Democrat National Committee. It's just well known. And of course, the interesting thing is that went to court because anybody who was involved inside the Democrat Party primary process knew that the game was clearly rigged against anybody from basically winning it fair and square. But ultimately, the court, just a number of years ago, and about a year and a half after that election, the court decided that the DNC, they have the right to cheat, and they have the right to rig their primaries against Sanders and anybody else they want to going into it. Now, that seems unfair, but that's the way it's set up there, and the court decided that it's your party, you can cheat if you want to. And that whole experience now is, of course, carrying forward into this hog fight that's going on right now at the Democrat National Committee. Now, on top of this, the weird optics that are going on right now from a leadership standpoint is that although Sanders got iced out of being the presidential nominee, he did get a lot of money and kind of a consolation prize. He's running around with his Fight Oligarchy tour with AOC out of New York, a congresswoman from New York, former bartender, who's now a multimillionaire since she's become a congresswoman. And the two of them are traveling around the country claiming that they want to fight the oligarchy, even though at this point in time, I think both of them might qualify as that very oligarchy that they're fighting. And this is particularly true because they're flying around the country in Lear jets and big custom jets flying everywhere. The hypocrisy is so ridiculous that you just can't even make this. It's not even a parody. I don't know how to explain this and how ridiculous and absurd it is on its face. I don't know why anybody really is that goes to these Fight Oligarchy activities with those two guys, claiming that they're going to fight oligarchy when, frankly, they're wealthier than anybody else in the audience, and they're traveling around in these private jets. But that being said, Sanders came out and defended the behavior, thinking that it's perfectly okay because, after all, the rules for him don't apply to the rest of us. He wants the rest of us to live in poverty for the rest of our lives, as long as he can fly around in Lear jets and pretend that he's going to fight oligarchy while he lives in his multiple homes and makes millions of dollars. That's perfectly okay, and they don't see any hypocrisy at all in this process. But then again, that's the Democrat Party today. The weirdness about this is that as most of us are looking at how obviously bizarre this convoluted process is about supposedly electing somebody and then deciding you don't like him and now removing him, in the way that they're doing this, it's clearly there's no rules here. This is just simply about whether you're part of whatever's considered the acceptable old guard inside the Democrat Party or not. What's funny is that David Hogg's defenders out there are Republicans. Now, Kevin McCarthy McCarthy and I, we wouldn't agree on a lot. I would have probably quite a few disagreements with him if we were to look down, and especially when it comes to the size of government and how bloated government gets. That being said, it's so very funny to watch Republicans come out and point out that, Hogg's kind of right. The game is rigged. He's clearly being cheated. The Democrat Party's obviously removing him for no good reason, or at least using kind of their internal games to remove him because they just don't like the fact that he's a crazy, angry guy trying to do crazy, angry things. And McCarthy's right to go out and defend him because he should be in there. He's a pretty good representative of the Democrat Party. So I'm kind of on McCarthy's side on this. I would say keep Hogg in the Democrat Party leadership. This guy is a good representation of where that party's at right now. They're bitter, angry. Bitter critters deserve to be in politics too, I think. And he seems to be a perfect representative of what the Democrat Party really stands for today. But, and this is a very consistent position that I've had for a long time now. This is actually an article I wrote back in 2017 just about my local Democrat Party here and the fact that they had elected a self-described trans radical witch who took over their party. And at the same time, they had problems with their rules at the time as well. They had gender equality sort of rules that they simply bypassed to put a trans radical witch in charge of the Thurston County Democrats where I live. And I totally supported this, the trans radical witch. I thought that I couldn't even think of anybody better to run the Thurston County Democrats than this guy. And the thing is, they don't have to cheat. If by following the rules, as crazy and archaic and bizarre as they might be for the party at times, all people are really asking is just stop cheating. You may be electing clowns, you may be electing weirdos, it may be bitter critters that are running your party, but that's what your party wants. That's the people that you're choosing. And to have the poobahs or whoever the leaders are within the party stepping up and saying, we don't like them now, we're going to remove them, that just doesn't seem fair or honest for anybody to do it. But unfortunately, that's the road the Democratic Party's going down. And listen, I'm not really judging here. I think these are good representations of who the Democrat Party wants to run the show. I did an article here back in 2019 just analyzing some of the key leaders that the Thurston County Democrats had at that time in our county, including a convicted drug dealer who had been their treasurer, a disbarred attorney who was their main union for fraud, who was their main union guy, the trans radical witch who was running the party, and even a major cult leader that was their primary financial backer. And this really was, and I think remains, the ultimate dream team for the Democrat Party in Thurston County. But you'll see similar collections of people running the party in various states and at the national level. And so why they think that, Hogg should be removed is unfortunately disappointing because sometimes these are the people that best represent what that party actually wants. And I'm here to defend them and recognize them for their achievements, their accomplishments, and the proper representation I think that these guys and these types of people really stand for in representing the Democrat Party. I mean, right now, it's hard for me to imagine somebody better than Hogg to represent the anger and kind of that bitter critter angle that you see right now as the infighting kind of continues and they're trying to take this guy out of their party. He just seems to fit what the party wants at this point in time. So, and he's followed the rules as far as I can tell to get here. So, it's made him rich. He's been famous. He got a Harvard degree out of it. Why not run the Democrat Party? That's a pretty good representation of who they stand for today. And I think that he should remain in the vice president position. Now, of course, sometimes that means that you have two angry white guys like this that are running the party. And even though you might pretend to be the party of diversity, you may have an alphabet soup of all kinds of different gender-bending concepts of how you want to divide up in some kind of DEI program as to who your leadership is. At the end of the day, these are the two people that the Democrat Party chose to run this show. And I don't see any reason why they need to change midstream just because they're having some doubts at this point in time. Now, for the rest of us, of course, we do look at these guys, including Hogg here, and we think, do we really want these bitter critters like that in charge of our lives? And the answer is no, we don't. because they are abusive. They are really probably some of the worst people we could ever find in our community to run any level of politics. We see this all the time. Washington State just saw it in the Olympia, in our state capitol, the Olympia hearing that we just had with the legislative session, with some of the most horrific bills that our legislatures ever put forward, including supporting violent criminals, taking away parents' rights, imposing ridiculous and absurd taxes, supporting massive waste and grift, just endless grift in the state agencies, and rent control, which has always proven to fail. All kinds of ways of hurting the people of Washington State. And people like this are trying to run the show. But nevertheless, at least they're out in the open and describing who they are. So, but the rest of us, of course, who are more on the conservative and liberty freedom side of the equation, no way we want anybody like Hogg or anybody else to run the show. But that doesn't mean they aren't good representations of what the Democrat Party wants. And if you set up the rules for who's going to be in charge, I think you need to follow those rules. And that's where we find this is where we're at right now politically. As a nation, as a state, and as our local communities, especially if you live in a bluish state like Washington, these are the guys that are going to be in charge, and for those of us who care about liberty and freedom, we want to replace them, of course, and put people that are sane, they believe math is real, might be able to tell the difference between a man and a woman. It would really be helpful to put much more sane people in office. And I believe that together, if those of you and I and other people out there in our community who actually don't want to support violent criminals in the community, who want to have lower taxes, want to have the ability to actually live without just stealing our life energy to support the big grifting operations the government has become so much locally, we have to be engaged. We have to recruit new candidates. We have to get good candidates into office. But none of that happens unless people like you and I and our friends and neighbors and other people, unless we're willing to actually show up. We have to show up to make a difference, because in the end, the future belongs to those who show up.